Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Within Range Coaching Podcast. I'm Ranger, certified holistic success coach, and in this podcast, I'm breaking down the journey that entrepreneurs face as they start their organization, find solutions to the problems in their way, and create an impact that lasts. So if you're an entrepreneur, nonprofit leader, or purpose-driven community member that wants to learn how to grow your impact and develop yourself as the person behind the mission, then this is the podcast for you. I know you're just as eager as I am to get started, so let's jump right in. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Today, we get to really dive in to see how we as individuals, communities, and organizations can truly turn our passion into purpose. This is a part of my Walk Across America series where I'm hanging out with and highlighting the people that are helping me make the walk happen. As I've been saying, I'm walking alone, but I couldn't do this without the support of my community. And I think that really ties in with what today's speaker and organization bring to the table. Today, I'm joined by Courtney from the Wander Project. Again, I could ramble on and on about the Wander Project myself and list all the cool things about Courtney, but today that's her job. So Courtney, thank you for hanging out with us today.
Thanks for inviting me, Ranger. I'm super pumped to be here to get to talk about Wander Project and hopefully maybe later hear a little bit more about your walk. I know we've chatted about it, but it's just such a perfect tie-in to talk about Wander Project and how one person, even on a walk alone, supports and is impacted by a community. So yes, I am the Director of Community Engagement at Wander Project. My background is in startups and nonprofits. So Wander Project was sort of the perfect fit for me in that we've only been around for just 5 years now. So sort of both that cross between nonprofit and startup when I joined 2 years ago. And what initially drew me in was the ability to inspire folks to do something that they love as a means to impact a cause that they care about. So primarily, right, we're talking about charity bibs, and I'm sure you'll have some questions about that. You've done that program. But yeah, I love the fact that every day my job is to wake up and talk to folks and help them figure out how to do some good in the world one step at a time.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's and that's really the message that for me, at least, I'm trying to get across in the podcast is one person can make a difference, not necessarily completely by themselves, but it's about them being able to inspire action, to communicate their message and bring people kind of into that fold of this is what we're trying to do. This is the mission. People like us can do things like this. And I think that's really great. And just to kind of be able to highlight you and bring it back to this, what would you say is your intention for today's episode?
An excellent question. I love intention setting. For me today, I will feel good at the end of this podcast if we together, Ranger, have inspired someone to go out and take a step. And it doesn't even have to be a step with Wander Project. But just to dive into something that they're passionate about, to be inspired, to take that first step to doing something meaningful, something that they care about.
That's a soundbite right there. I will feel good if we've inspired someone to take a step. And when you say that, what comes up for me is it can be as small as that. It's just about moving in a direction of impact. Because I feel like a lot of times people, when they think of making an impact or making a difference, it's these life-changing, world-changing years and years. But it sounds like what you're really trying to get across is you can take action today to make an impact tomorrow.
Absolutely. Yeah. It doesn't have to be some big grandiose thing. It can be, if that's your jam, if that's where you're ready to dive in, absolutely. But it could just be volunteering one afternoon once a month at your local food pantry. It could just be taking a trash bag with you on your next hike and packing out some trash that you see. It's collectively, right, when we all do these small steps that we're making those bigger shifts towards the world that we want to see.
Yeah. And in the spirit of that, in terms of taking that step towards being the change you want to see and making that impact, I do kind of want to go back a little bit to your story. You said that you worked in Starbucks and what else?
Oh, sorry, startups.
Startups.
So I've
Okay.
worked with
I was like, okay,
startups and
coffee. Okay.
nonprofits. Yeah.
Startups and
Sorry, I'm a little
nonprofits.
congested. The weather has been bananas here, and I'm just a little stuffed up myself.
Yeah, me too. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
startups, nonprofits.
Okay, there we go. I was gonna say, like, how did that kind of happen? But what was that experience like? Because I know a lot of people that are going to be listening to the podcast are going to be, either entrepreneurs, early entrepreneurs, just starting in their business game journey. So, like, what was that experience like working for so many startups and nonprofits?
Yeah. So I had worked for nonprofits for about a decade, both local ones. I'm in northern Michigan, so environmentally focused, as well as some regional and even national nonprofits. I was on a board for about mountain bike organization, and this woman said, I'm at this software testing company, and I know you know nothing about that, but you seem to know a lot about people, and like organizations and doing a lot with a little, right? Kind of the hallmark of a nonprofit. And she said, I think you would just be wonderful at this startup. Like, let me know if you're interested. And I was at that point in time looking for my next opportunity for personal growth and using my skills for good. So I took a dive. It wasn't even a tiptoe. It was just a dive into the software testing startup. I was employee number 5. And over 2 years, grew it to a team of 20, wore every hat, marketing, finance, wore everything in between there as I helped them grow and felt really proud of the time that I was there in the people side of things, which was an area that I really loved in nonprofits, of course, all the good work, but saw a lot of crossover, right? Nonprofits and startups are at the heart, kind of the same, right? In the beginning, you're trying to do a lot of good, important work that you believe in with maybe not as many resources as you would like to have.
Yeah. Hey, I got to call HR real quick, and you just kind of turn
Yeah,
around and look in the mirror.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's interesting because one of the guests that I interviewed yesterday for the podcast, Rachel Arnold from the Hospice Promise Foundation and Grace Hospice, she did the same thing when she jumped into the medical field. Like, she didn't have experience there. It wasn't her deal, but she was great with people. She had great management experience. And it sounds like what I'm hearing from you is just because you're going into a field doesn't mean you need to have experience in that specific field. There's a lot of other skills that kind of transfer over. So my question for you there is, what was that experience like for you of having so many different hats? How did you manage the hat rack of working in a startup?
I think I just wore them all at the same time. I don't know if there was a rack and like I was constantly like changing them out. I think they were just maybe stacked. I am a person who appreciates a challenge, or at least have grown into appreciating that challenge of kind of having a few different things on the stovetop, so to speak, at one point in time. My younger self definitely appreciated, more structure and would not have thrived in a startup. But as I've grown, I've come to really appreciate kind of the excitement of like, okay, this morning, we're going to figure out how to balance the budget. And this afternoon, yep, we're going to lean into figuring out our employee handbook 2.0 revision. And then later on this evening, we're going to figure out, our new process for what onboarding clients looks like. I really enjoyed kind of doing multiple puzzles maybe at one time is a better comparison, right? It wasn't even just working on one puzzle. It was kind of managing like 3 or 4 all at one time.
Yeah, kind of the puzzle master wearing all the hats, the balancing act. That's interesting that it's really about how you're envisioning all of those different roles. And it sounds like you kind of just took them in all at once. So, and I'm sure other people might be thinking this too, like when you're starting a business, I mean, I'm in that same spectrum right now of I'm doing everything, trying to figure out taxes and marketing and, all these different rules that I have to follow. What would be your suggestion to someone that's getting into the game and they're seeing that they have to wear all these hats and they're just so overwhelmed with all the different fashions and outfits? What would you recommend to them?
Yeah, I've actually given this advice before. I still consult for nonprofits on the side, and When folks are starting out, when you can hire, I always encourage like hire for the things that you don't want to do or don't know how to do. You can wear a lot of hats. You can't wear all of them, right? Eventually you're going to have to hire someone or outsource something. And that was one of the reasons that I did choose to jump into that startup. The CEO and the COO both knew what they were really well or really good at doing rather, and knew kind of the areas that like they had no interest in or no experience in. And so, they brought me in because that was my background and my interest. And so I was really able to thrive because I was just doing the pieces that I was interested and excited to do and had some business acumen in. It would have been a different situation, I think, if they were like, oh, yeah, come in and do this thing that you don't really enjoy doing. Right. Or if they had been like, we know exactly how we want it, just come in and do it. That's a different feeling or situation. And for me, coming in and supporting that team in the areas that were strengths for me allowed us all to run fast together, really fast.
Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of that kind of ties into knowing yourself and being honest with your capabilities, what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, and it to kind of stick with this multiple hat mentality. When one of those hats starts getting a little bit too heavy or too big to the where it's just unreasonable, find a Courtney, find someone that can take it, look great in it, and keep going forward. And you guys can go further, faster together. I think the natural next question for that is, when do you think, this is very tactical, of course, but when do you think someone will know they're ready to hire someone to help out with the business or the nonprofit or startup?
Yeah, that's a good question. Putting on my CFO hat, which I haven't worn in a while, but was one of the hats that I had on at that startup. It has to make financial sense for you. It might be a little bit of a risk, right? You might be dipping into your safety net for a half a month or a month, to get to that next level. That's something, as a business owner, you're always going to have to be comfortable with. There's a certain amount of risk in owning a business. And I'm not certainly saying, go out and risk it all to hire the next person, but you can set some financial markers for yourself. Like, okay, it'll feel less uncomfortable, less risky, still a little bit of risk. But at this point, I can hire someone part-time, or I can hop on Fiverr and get an hourly person to just help with this one thing. Or you could even, I know when I was at the software testing company, sometimes we were ready for a position, but not ready for it full time. So we would hire part-time, someone maybe who's still in college and just getting into whatever it was. And I think it was like marketing, with the intent that it could grow into a full-time role. And that seemed to be a great fit because they also, I'll be looking for full-time when I graduate, but not right now. So I think we got creative with our hiring to be just in time, just the right fit for both us and the person we were hiring. A big part of the software testing company that I really valued was that it was human-centered leadership. Certainly we cared about profits and our clients and those things, but at the end of the day, one of our values was doing right by the people in our company. And we had a checkbox on almost every decision we made. And if it wasn't going to be good for our team, it didn't matter if it was good for the client and going to make us a bunch of money. If it wasn't good for our team, it didn't pass the test. And, that was one of the reasons I ended up at Wander Project too, throughout the interview process and looking at the company. They don't just care about doing good in the world and budgets and things like that. They care about the team behind the scenes, making it all happen.
Yeah. And I think that's another good point. Now, that was a great segue into talking more about Wander Project, but to just kind of highlight what you just said there. When that hat gets too heavy, you don't need someone necessarily to take it full time. You can do a part-time person, you can do an independent contractor. It's just being open to the possibilities and being resourceful, because there's so many resources out there now. It's just about finding what works best for you and your organization. So I think that's a really
absolutely
great point to highlight. And kind of moving into Wander Project and where you're at now, could you go ahead and just kind of describe what it is that Wander Project does, the impact that you guys make, and what that looks like?
Yeah. So you and I have both said it at this point about turning passion into purpose. Wander Project originally started as an initiative in-house by a running company that we're still partnered with today. And the CEO basically wanted to find a way to give back, especially to the areas that these running events were being held in, sort of to offset the fact that, a couple thousand people were going to be there for a few days. And after 2 years of that, realized, it shouldn't just be limited to this one company. It should be an opportunity for anyone who's doing, sort of an outdoor endeavor. And so at that point in time, Wander Project became its own 501c3 charity and has grown and added more event partners, primarily running events. So someone can sign up for a run that they were probably already planning on doing as a charity bib. In exchange for committing to a charity bib, we waive their registration fees. Essentially, we cover the cost of their entry. And then they say, this is the charity I want to raise money for. And we support them from registration to what we call fundraising finish line, and making sure that come race day, they're getting to raise and donate out money to a cause that's close to their heart.
Yeah, no, that's great. The way that I describe Wander Project is you're a nonprofit that empowers other nonprofits. And kind of what I'm hearing you say there is that it was born out of that passion for running, but also being, again, honest and acknowledging this is great. We're all out here. We're all healthy. We're all fit. Great. But there's a ton of people out here. There's an impact that happens that might not be the greatest. And that reminds me, again, of another episode we recorded with Cold Blooded Caffeine Company. And that's what their purpose is. They're a coffee company that gives back to coffee producing countries for conservation purposes. And I think that's a really good lesson, is that when you're passionate about something, you can be honest about the problems that arise from that activity, and you can do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, Ranger, I used to work for Leave No Trace, the Center for Outdoor Ethics. So I completely understand, essentially, when we go out in the outdoors, right? We always used to, when I worked there, we always talked about loving the outdoors to death, right? It's the outdoors is such a place of healing. And I want everybody to go outside, whether it's a run, a hike, a backpack, a very long walk, whatever it is, right? But there's always some impact, whether you're walking, whether you're riding an ATV, whatever it is, there's always a give and a take. And so again, that was one of the reasons that drew me to Wander Project, was the fact that so when someone runs a charity bib, they have two options. They can choose from one of our official partners. And those charity partners, again, are the ones kind of in and around the areas that we're running, so that we can directly support and help offset some of that impact. But starting last year, based on feedback we were hearing, some folks said, that's great. I love the environment. Of course I do. I'm out running. But, maybe they just lost someone to breast cancer, or they're really passionate about getting kids out and running, or a music program or arts. There are so many causes that other folks were asking us to support that we created the Your Choice option. So folks could tell us who they care about, right? There's that Jacques Cousteau quote that's, paraphrasing, right? Like, people protect what they love. So who are we to tell people, like, yeah, you have to love one of these organizations and go out and raise money for them? At the end of the day, we want people to run for the cause that they care about, or hike fast, or walk, or however they're getting to that finish line.
Yeah. And it sounds like, just, again, that's being open to the possibility of bringing more people into the fold by letting them kind of have that customization, being open to them connecting that run and that fundraising to what's important to them.
Yeah. And, I think about the ripple effect that creates, right? Kind of going back to our mission of like inspiring people to take that first step. And last year, because of the Your Choice program, rather than supporting projects at, I think, like a dozen nonprofits, we supported projects at 93 nonprofits across the United States. I think we had folks run from 39 different states. So when you think about that ripple effect and how that ripples outward, a person doing one run in Joshua Tree who's maybe, from Michigan raised for an organization they care about in Tennessee that, put school supplies and backpacks in the hands of 300 kids. That it's awesome.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that's so unique about, and I think this kind of does also go back to what we were talking about earlier with your experience in the startup world with the tech industry, that it's not just about being directly involved with that specific organization or having that experience prior. You can make an impact with your skills, which in this case would be running, walking, hiking, whatever physical activity, but you're still making impacts across state lines, across all these different boundaries. So it's really about just being open to your passion, your experiences, and your skills, and how that can transfer to helping someone else.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you never know. It's almost hard to plan, right? Sure, if you raise money, it's going to support a project and you know that that's going to have an impact. But, when we're talking about the small steps, just go out and do something in your community this week. You truly, you never know the impact that it's actually going to have. And it's hard to plan for. And sometimes you only see the results truly much later on. And I think that can be a hard thing for some people, maybe who are result oriented, to wrap their mind around. But it happens. And just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's still not a good thing. And I always remind folks of that. At a running event last year, we took some folks on sort of a field trip to a nonprofit that someone else was running a charity bib for. So someone was like, I'm going to raise money for this awesome, animal sanctuary. And I thought, oh, what a cool thing by this race. Let's take people there and just, go on a tour of this event. I found out a week later after running that event, which was a cool thing, a family emailed and said, hey, we went on that field trip with you. And I just want to let you know our family adopted our very first pet. We went back the next day and adopted, that 3-legged kitten, that everybody got to see. And our family just fell in love with it. And, she's on her way home with us right now. So you really never know what will come out of just doing that one good thing.
And that's such a interesting externality of that race. It's this race, physical, mental health, all that great stuff for the individual. Wander Project comes in, brings all these purpose-driven individuals, connects them to this shelter or this animal sanctuary, and now a critter has a forever home. I think that's such an interesting thing, because you would never, like you were saying, you would never be able to plan for that. Nobody's going to write that in the business plan or the goals for 2024. But
Right.
These great things happen when you create that possibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm a numbers guy. I love the little numbers. And there was a few posts that you guys made on social media at the end of last year. You said that Wander Project has been around for about 5 years.
I think we officially, since 2018, but I don't think that was when we had our official 501c3 status. I don't know the timeline entirely by heart. We started doing that work then, but I think it was 2019 that we officially got our 501c3 status.
Okay, so 4, 5, 6, whatever years. Okay.
In there, a handful of years.
Yeah, and I mean, just reading straight off of the Instagram post, it looks like after just 4, 5, 6, whatever years of being an organization, just in 2023 alone, you guys helped raise $400,000.
Yeah. And I mean, yes, we were helping people figure out how to peer-to-peer fundraise. That's my job, is helping folks figure out how to craft and make their first ask and tell their story, right? But at the end of the day, it was all of those folks going out and making the ask and raising awareness for the cause they care about. It was all of those charity bid participants who raised that $400,000.
I was going to say, I was a charity bib runner last year at the Yosemite race, the half marathon. And I raised, I think, just shy of 1,200, 1,400, which feels like a drop in the bucket compared to that 400,000. But if it wasn't for people like me that were out there doing the work, fundraising, it really adds that drop in the bucket that fills it up by the end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a couple of outliers. Our top overall fundraiser, she raised, I think, something like She individually raised over $40,000. She had two other
Wow.
people with her. I think between the three of them, they raised something like $48,000 for their charity. And certainly we have a handful of individuals like that every year, but it's much more often, I would say, probably well over 100 of the folks out of all the charity bibs are raising in that $1,000 range. And Ranger, I'm going to push back a little. That is not just a drop in the bucket. $1,000 is a lot of money. Okay, maybe some of your listeners out there have much bigger bank accounts than I do, right? But at the end of the day, $1,000 is a lot of money.
Yes, thank you for the check on that. I think it's so easy to compare and, one versus 400, it's just such an easy thing to compare. But no, you're right that it's not a small feat. It's a part of that bigger whole, and individual that is still a significant amount. And I know that you do a lot of work with the peer-to-peer fundraising aspect for folks that are in the nonprofit world that are listening right now. What would you say are like a couple tips that you lean on the most when it comes to peer-to-peer fundraising or sponsors, or what kind of value do you think you can kind of provide for fundraising?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that question maybe in two ways because you pointed out, what advice would I give to a nonprofit, which is maybe different than the advice that I would give to an individual who's fundraising. As a nonprofit, a lot of nonprofits, right, are sort of in a traditional fundraising model where they have donors and a couple of times a year they make an ask, support the good work that we're doing, and they might write a few grants, and that's typically their revenue stream. Nonprofits themselves can engage in having folks peer-to-peer fundraise for them. That's what we do with the nonprofits we engage with. They can join at a certain level and we'll help them figure out how to recruit folks to run for them, right? So then instead of just directly asking people for money, they're asking people essentially then for time and energy. Could you run, walk, or hike for us? And then that person, right, then turns and goes out to their community to share the awareness of that organization and fundraise for them rather than the organization having to do the fundraising themselves. So it's a nice way if you've got some folks who are really passionate about your organization. It's a good way to engage them, especially if they're not in a position currently to write you a check for $1,000 or $5,000. Maybe they can't do that, but they're already planning on going for a run. They could encourage and engage with their community to raise that money on your behalf. The other side of that, right, is if someone is thinking about fundraising for a cause that they care about, figure out your audience, right? Just like you're making a business pitch, know your audience and engage with them in the way that feels meaningful. The way I ask my grandma for support for a fundraiser is way different than how I ask my running club or people at the gym or my coworkers. So figure out your audience and segment your asks based on those pools.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because again, it goes back to resourcefulness, and from all the I don't know business content that I see and TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Affiliates are something that a lot of businesses use to sell their products. Kind of like, hey, we'll sponsor you if you promote us and you get a cut, whatever, whatever. And it sounds like this is kind of that taking that mentality and applying it to nonprofits. Rather than your team or your members going out there and making the asks, it's, hey, can you come and support us? Can you help us raise these funds? You probably won't get a cut of whatever you raise, but it's you get something else valuable in return in terms of helping us achieve our mission that you also care about. So it's again leaning on that community. Hey, do what you're passionate about. You can help us at the same time. It's like a multiplier of that of scratching the brain centers of that person.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah, that's such a great comparison because at the end of the day, that's what it is. And while that fundraiser might not get a cut in the way that an affiliate would, right? It's maybe a little bit more altruistic, right? They're in it because they believe in the cause. Not that necessarily an affiliate wouldn't believe in the business, but I think about some of our folks last year, we had a father-son duo who fundraised together. The father had just recently beat, I think it was either a double or a triple cancer diagnosis. And he was fundraising for a organization that helped support him as the breadwinner of his family with their bills while he was going through treatment. So then he turned around once he was healthy and fundraised for them to be able to provide, support for three families who were going through what he just recently went through. So, he's not getting a cut of that, but he's certainly, paying the karma bank back in triplicate.
That's amazing. And I feel like a lot of people have a lot more of an intrinsic value towards money and the dollar sign, right? But it's really about finding value in impact. And kind of like during this conversation, it's like you don't get a cut of the profits, but you get a cut of that impact. He gets to look and say, look at what I helped make happen. I was a part of that. They wouldn't have, sure, they maybe somebody else could have stepped in. But now somebody else stepping in, it's just going to help more people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's, yeah, again, another reason why we ultimately expanded to the Your Choice model. It's, Ranger, there are so many things in the world that need our attention. It's overwhelming when we try to do them all, right? But if you just focus on one area that you really care about or you're really passionate about, and you just take that one step, right? It's when everybody in tandem is all just focused on their one thing that they care about and taking a step, that we really start to see that forward momentum. Those three families that now are having their bills paid while they're going through this, terrible situation. When they get to the other side of that, they're going to remember the support and the help that they had along the way. If environment is your jam and you help support trail building, and then you see the photo of, kids going for their first hike on that trail that you helped build, right? That motivates you to continue to do the work, but also all the people who get to hike that trail and hear the story of how it came to be. I think the storytelling is a big piece of it. And that is something that at Wander Project we're leaning into. Folks don't like to toot their own horn, but when you're doing good work, it's important. That inspiration is a good catalyst to keep others, especially when you don't see those immediate results.
Yeah. And I think that's, God, we could talk all day. There's so many routes I can kind of see this going on, or trails in our case. But it sounds like on the nonprofit side, it's recruit ambassadors, get people that are passionate about something else, see how they can kind of find that cross intersection and get a cut on that impact. And on the individual side, if you're raising money for an organization, it really does sound like a crash course in marketing. How do you tell a story? How do you get people involved in that impact and mission? And if people want to get involved with, like in this specific case, running and making an impact, what tools do you provide to those runners, and how can people get in contact with you if that's something they want to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. We provide a whole toolkit of resources. It starts with a 6-step checklist that's kind of staged out like you're running a race, a start line to finish line, and sort of the aid stations along the way. And each one of those sections has some video tutorials, some templates, some additional resources. So really from like setting up your fundraiser, figuring out how to make your first ask, all the way through thanking your donors. We kind of cover all of the bases in addition to providing virtual office hours. So at any point along the journey, if someone's like, I need to practice saying this out loud, or I need a copywriter, someone to proofread this, that's me. I'm there to help, to brainstorm ideas, whatever it takes to get to that fundraising finish line. Folks can always reach me at info@wanderproject.org. And they can certainly learn more on wanderproject.org by clicking Charity Bib. They'll see, I think we still have 29 events. Well, we have 2 this weekend, 29 events after that this year that they could sign up for to get involved and raise for a cause they care about.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting. I love the imagery that's just constant throughout everything. The starting line, the aid stations, the finish line. And just to throw my own little tip, if you are a nonprofit leader or you're fundraising, send thank you letters. When I get them, it's just so nice. Nobody sends letters anymore. It's always junk mail or bills. So having a handwritten note is just so neat, and people appreciate it. And that's my little tip I'm throwing in there at the very end.
And I'm going to add to that, especially if you're a nonprofit, the receipt, right? That tax deductible, that thing that says you made a donation, that's great, but that's not a thank you letter. Make sure they get that right. That's the receipt, their proof that they gave you money. But they should still get a letter from you that's like, wow, like, thank you for this gift, for believing in us, for choosing to support the work that we're doing. And if you can personalize it, it's obviously not feasible for every donation, but set that threshold. You get a donation over $200 or $500 or whatever it is, make sure that you are thanking those folks in a really personal way. For our peer-to-peer fundraisers, I tell folks, thank them in the way that you connected with them. If you called them to ask them for money, call them to thank them for their donation and tell them how your race went. If you sent them an email, great, send them an email. If you walked over to your neighbor, walk over after that race or hobble over, depending on where you are in the recovery process. Tell them how it went and thank them for their support.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Always say thank you. And in the spirit of saying thank you, Courtney, thank you so much for your time today, for spending some of your, Friday morning with us. Happy March 1st. I'm not sure when this is going to go out, but if you are interested in signing up for a race with Wander Project, it sounds like there's 29, 27-ish by the time this comes out, races that are available. So if somebody wants to learn more about Wander Project, what would be the best route for them to go to?
Yeah, so hopping on our website, wanderproject.org, is where you're going to, of course, find all the information. I always encourage folks to take a look at our FAQ page. It has a great chart, a little more information about a charity bib, or you can click directly on charity bib and see all of our upcoming events and register right there. Certainly, if folks have questions or want to know more before they commit, I totally get it. They can reach out to me at info@wanderproject.org.
Perfect. Awesome, Courtney. I'll go and throw all that in the show notes, and on my Instagram and my social media, I'm going to be posting about you guys a whole heck of a lot during the walk and beyond. So thank you again for your time. There's a lot of value there in terms of if you're a nonprofit leader, if you're a community member that wants to get involved. There's so much that you can do, and it's really about finding those possibilities. So thank you for sharing what those have looked like for you and what you've seen in the industry.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Ranger. I really appreciated it, and I hope everyone gets out there and does some good this week.
Thank you, everyone, for investing your time with us today. If you'd like to continue on your journey of building an impact-driven life, there's a couple freebies down in the description and the show notes that are going to help you in that mission. If you'd like to learn more about Wander Project, go ahead and check them out on Instagram. All of that information will be in the show notes. And until next week, remember to have fun, stay safe, and be yourself.